Yeah, man. We are live. It's Thursday night reality check, and I got a special guest tonight, Pat Stedman. Pat Stedman, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Tony. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, excellent, man. You know, you're one of my favorite guests, if not my favorite guest. We get deep, and we're going deep tonight. We are going deep tonight. It is your cheating heart. We're going to talk about cheating. We're going to talk about, I guess you would say, affairs, infidelity. I think is another good word for it. But the first thing I want to do in this stream tonight is I want to define cheating. I think that's a definition that we really need to kind of talk about right at the beginning. Let's define cheating in Pat Stedman terms.
Yeah, so everybody's got their own definition, but I think if we're being realistic and trying to be universal here, I think it's when you start to cross the barrier into kissing somebody else. That's, I think, official cheating territory. And of course, you know, there's a difference between a kiss and sexual contact with somebody else. But to me, kissing is when, okay, there's a lot of lines that you cross before you're flirting heavily. Maybe you're holding somebody's hand. Maybe you're making suggestive comments. All that stuff is very inappropriate. But I would consider kissing somebody else to be cheating.
So you think that's like the we'll call it the barrier to entry?
Yeah, I would call it barrier to entry. You know, I think it corresponds, it's pretty logical. Like it corresponds with, you know, the old school base method, right? You got the first base, well, you kissed a girl or you made out with a girl, maybe you can say. I mean, that's first base. It would seem to indicate that you're on the field, you know what I mean, at that point. But obviously there's a difference based on how far you cheated. Did you cheat the first base? Did you cheat the second, third, home run? And that's when I think we start to get into the consequences and whatnot, and how guys are supposed to respond to that stuff.
Now, wouldn't most people say, like, especially now with texting or say a phone call, wouldn't that kind of implicate it?
Like that would be cheating?
Yeah, I mean, is that the precursor to cheating or an affair, or would some people consider that cheating?
Some people, I mean, I know in trad communities, I mean, there's some women who consider looking at porn to be cheating. I mean, some people have some really stringent lines about what cheating entails. And by the way, I don't believe that. Not that I think looking at porn is good, but opening up a browser is a little bit less effort than like going out and making a move. So people develop that term like emotional cheating. I actually think it's valid that you have feelings for somebody else, or you're encouraging feelings from somebody else, and you can start to say things that are really inappropriate and cross some lines and can be, I mean, they're just totally wrong. But personally, I'm old school. I don't think it's cheating until you cross a physical barrier.
Okay. What about
because it's too because let me just finish, because it's too subjective.
Okay.
It's too subjective. Somebody can say, well, you cheated on me because maybe a girl says that to her guy, because the guy says to the other girl, like, you've got amazing breasts. You cheated on me. Well, he didn't touch her breasts. He didn't do anything. It was a stupid comment. It was a humiliating comment, but it's not cheating. It's not cheating. Something happens when you cross a physical barrier. And then I think something happens even beyond, like, physical barrier is cheating. And then there's sexual barrier, which is a whole nother magnitude. And then there's full on sex, which is a whole nother magnitude. And I think your forgiveness threshold varies based on those things. I mean, everything's context. We're going to get into that, I'm sure, but
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Of course, I've got a lot of notes as usual. Now, it's of my opinion, and I won't go into my opinions tonight, but that men cheat for different reasons than women cheat. So let's dive into that.
Well, I think I would agree with that. I would agree with that, but I actually am more of the perspective that everybody cheats primarily for emotional reasons. I do believe that there is a higher propensity of men to cheat just simply because of sex
Mhm,
and to have it not mean anything. I
mhm,
think women can do that too, but men are much more likely to do it. But I don't see that as more than maybe 20% of cheating with men, and I'll get into why that is. And actually, that even might be too high. It really depends where you want to draw the line. Guys really, I mean, guys obviously want sex. You know, it's a physiological, demand. Um, but sex is very wrapped up in emotion for men. It's wrapped up in emotion differently than it is for women, but men get a tremendous amount of validation from sex. So the guys who are at such maybe like a high level of not demanding validation, but they have such a super high sex drive that they're in a situation, a girl throws themselves at him, or he decides he just needs to get laid, so he goes out and fucks a girl. I mean, that stuff certainly happens. And I think it happens predominantly in maybe a long distance kind of dynamic. But your average guy in that situation is going to feel compelled to cheat because that woman who's offering sex is offering him something he's not getting back at home.
mhm,
And so he's feeling that he's not valued. Maybe he's feeling emasculated because maybe his woman, they've been together, she's turning down sex a lot. And he goes out and this, you know, attractive woman is making him feel like he's a man again. That's an emotional quality there. Now you can say that he's starved of sex and that will amplify it for sure, but fundamentally there's an emotional reason for it to happen. So I think that the transactional sort of I just need to get laid stuff is a lot smaller a proportion than is commonly indicated.
Yeah. So when I say that women cheat for different reasons, I'm kind of under I will say the thought process that women cheat more to cause harm. That's kind of what I think. In other words,
Mm,
to to really like to show like her man, whether it be a husband or boyfriend, that just to kind of prove a point.
mhm.
You follow me?
That's very profound, Tony, actually. I hadn't thought of it in that way before, eh, but you're totally right. Men cheat because they, putting aside, okay, you have that subset that just do it for physical reasons, but most of them cheat because they don't feel maybe appreciated, but
Mhm,
they don't want, how do I put it? A woman might cheat because she doesn't feel appreciated, but her reasons for it are different. Like there's more of a attraction element to it, and it's more a punishment on the guy. Like you weren't worthy,
mhm.
so I'm gonna go off and I'm gonna do this. You weren't worthy. That's when most women cheat. It very much is that. And look, a lot of guys are gonna get triggered by the statement probably, but women cheat very often as like a cry for help. You know, the guy is being such a bitch, but she has, assuming it's not just asset related, there's part of her, if she really wanted out, she'd just leave. Why would she stay in and cheat? Okay, maybe a lot of her life is wrapped up in the relationship. And I'm certainly not, I know it's very, very common that that's the case, but a lot of times a woman cheats and either she's caught and she explains herself in a very like aloof, like, well, this is, I did it because of this, right? They can be very, very callous with it, but behind that callousness is like a very logical factualness. It's really interesting to me how women are emotional creatures, but when it really comes down to it, to sex and stuff like that, they can be some of the most raw logic. Like you just weren't doing it correctly. And how often does a man say the same thing to a woman? Um, does that make sense? Does that?
It does. And I'm looking at the comments here, like Alexio says, LOL, cry for help. And I get I get that response because like we were talking a little backstage. I think when a guy is really into a relationship and thinks it's going well, and for a guy that's single, you can look at it a different way. I can look at it and say, okay, well, if I was in this deep relationship and the woman cheated on me, I would just walk away. But
Mhm.
that's not always the case with all guys, and that's a fact. And a lot
Right.
of guys won't admit that. I know that. I know everybody wants to puff up and say, if a woman cheated on me, I would just haul ass, forget her. But that's not always the case. I mean, I know that for a fact. I've seen, I can't tell you how many friends go through that exact scenario, you know.
Mhm.
So, what's your thoughts on that as far as like, you know?
Well, yeah, I'll tell a story real quick. I think it might tie this together. So I know a guy, and he was married, and he just wasn't very ambitious. He was drinking a lot, wasn't really ambitious, and the and so she had an affair. She was making more money than him. She had an affair, and he found out about it. And she had, and by the way, she had that affair after he had passed up on a big job opportunity that would have like. And she wanted to just be like a homemaker. She wanted to leave her job. She wanted him to be making the money. Like this is not some manipulative, bitch kind of situation, right? She told him she's making more money. She says, I don't want to be working. I want to take care of the kids. I want to have more kids. I want you to make the money. Then you have an opportunity to do it. Will you do it? And he said no. And he decided to take his job, which was making a fraction of her salary, continue with it, and to keep drinking. And so she had an affair, but she didn't leave him immediately. And there was still within that period opportunities when that came out. There were opportunities for him to change, for things to change. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. And so she eventually left him. Now, I don't condone cheating, obviously. I don't
Mhm.
like it. Um, you had the comment just in here about from the vital message about, yeah, you're not supposed to, you don't want to accept it, but understand also what guy gets cheated on. Under the vast majority of circumstances, what guy gets cheated on. It's easy for a guy who either really has his shit together to say that, yeah, I'm not gonna, like, I would never stay with a woman who cheat on me. And it's easy for a guy who doesn't even get into the arena at all to say, he's not involved in that experience where his self is coming out, to say that. It's a lot more messy in practice from what
Mhm.
I've seen. And in the cases where it occurs, the guys usually are asking for it to a certain extent. And by the way, the women are usually asking for it too when it happens to them. Everything is co-created. It may be that you were really great and maybe you only own 10% of it. Maybe you owned 80% of it, but you were part of the reason it happened. And we have to be very honest with ourselves about it. And that to me is like, you can be compassionate about something and also not tolerate it at the same time.
All right, well, let's get into this. What do you do if you're cheated on? Okay. And what do you do if you're the cheater? In other words, how do people handle this internally?
Okay. So what do you do if you've been cheated on? So what kind of so let's get some context here because I think it's very important. So how did you find out that you were cheated on?
Mhm.
Did she tell you? Did she tell you? She said, I was out with the girls the other night. I got drunk and I let myself get too close to this guy and he kissed me and I allowed it. Okay. Maybe she kissed him, right? But she says that. Do you forgive her? Okay. What else is going on in the relationship? How is the relationship across the board? How long have you been together? What have you invested together? What was there a reason that she was being so open to the guy? Like, this is real talk here. This is real talk. Okay. A lot of guys are going to get triggered by this stuff. Is that you have a girl, you guys are great. Everything is really great. You have a pretty good relationship for the most part. But maybe there's a level of intimacy you haven't breached yet. Maybe there's some things both of you have been holding back. You're a couple months in, a lot of promise, and she goes out and this happens and she tells you about it. Do you break up with her? I don't personally think you're a cuck for not breaking up with her.
Mhm.
Now, I haven't experienced that situation, but if you're very quick, any guy here who's like, "Oh yeah, of course I break up with her." You're obviously not dealing in the real world. You're obviously not allowing yourself to get close to women because it gets a little bit more complicated when emotions are involved, when there's other things going on. This is what I talk about when we see these certain lines. Now, are you with a girl and she's pretending to be really special and then she goes out for a weekend with the girls and she fucks another guy and you find out about it because you find a picture of it on her phone? Totally different scenario. She didn't come clean about it. She went way further than the first example, and she's leading a second life. That's an automatic breakup. There's absolutely no way that you can stay with a girl like that
Mhm.
because of the deceit. In the first example, there was a poor error of judgment. A line was crossed, but was there something that could be learned from it? Did that happen because of something else going on that could be that there was a level of connection that wasn't there? She was honest about it with you. She didn't hide it. She took the risk on herself to tell you, knowing that she could lose you. What is that worth? And that's
Yeah.
why,
So,
that's
so
why
you're
those questions
saying
are
is
context,
why would she tell you? I mean, that's what I'm kind of seeing from this.
Well, the reason she tell you is because she actually wants you. And so in that state, she may have felt weak and so she did it. And because she's a good person, she didn't want to carry that on her. And because she respected you enough to tell you it. And believe it or not, girls will do that. They will do it. Especially in a situation where, maybe there are other people around, she has maybe the awareness that it could get back to you. So she takes the first step in doing it. But there's situations, I mean, I've worked with client situations where a girl would not be with necessarily friends who would have it pass on, and maybe they don't say it immediately, but there were some problems in the relationship. Things start to get shifted, And then she has a moment. She's like, I have to tell you something. And then she tells them that. And sometimes it's actually a little bit further. Sometimes it's like, we did some stuff together. We start to get into much more of a gray area at that point, right? But the point is that it's a very, very different situation. And for me personally, and I want to emphasize for all the people who are I've never dealt with this. I've never dealt with it on a personal level, where I had to make this kind of choice. But in a theoretical sense, putting myself in the situation, to me, the honesty is very, very important. It's very, very important. And I told my wife from the very beginning, if you ever cheated on me, like if you ever slept with somebody else, I would break up with you. But I would want to know, and I would forgive you. I totally wouldn't hold it against you if you did it. Because to me, it's like I understand people are human. I don't obviously want to be with somebody who I couldn't trust in that capacity, but the honesty would matter a lot to me. I don't know if I could continue with them at that point, but I'd still want to know. But I wouldn't hate him. I really wouldn't hate him. That's just where I'm at. I wouldn't hate him for it. I've seen too much. Like I've just seen way too much about how people are to be. I don't want to be around people who are doing that kind of stuff, but I know what kind of shit brings people to that point. And with the exception of some really damaged, like borderline girls, I understand in many relationships why this stuff kind of happens. Like the girl's either immature, she's really messed up, but a lot of times it's just because the guy he's missing all the signals. It's building and building and building towards that point. So,
I mean, personally for me, like if I know, and this is my opinion on this. And there's we know of a guy in the manosphere umbrella that I'm not going to say his name, but he went on a podcast and said that his wife cheated on him. Now, I'm being straight up. I've liked the guy, but I've never looked at him the same.
yeah,
I haven't, and it just totally skewed my. I don't want to say my opinion of him, but it's like it's like sometimes you want to say to somebody, man up, kind of thing. And I don't even like that term, but it's like, come on.
No, I mean, it's a lack of boundaries in the situation. And, I'm looking at some of the guys in the chat. They don't really understand the distinction of being able to say, yeah, I'm not going to be with you anymore, but I'm not going to spend the next 5 years on red pill forums hammering out how much I hate women as a result of the situation. They can't understand the distinction between those two things. Having a boundary with a woman and okay, you cheat on me, we're done. Obviously, something was going on in the relationship. It's not reconcilable at this point, so we're finished. But especially if there's kids in the picture, like, can we depart on good terms? There's a level of respect in telling the other person that you did it. Even if there's an acknowledgement at the end, there's a level of respect involved with that. And I don't know, I personally would rather be respected. I'd rather that you're not being respected when you're cheated on, but you know what I mean? That at least that consolation. I at the same time, I do understand some people, certain relationships are different with that stuff. I can't relate to it personally, and it's very rare, but I would say, and God, this is going to get the guys in the chat so fucking pissed off. But look, I'm giving you guys real data on real experiences. So here's an opportunity for you guys to get out of the fucking dogma for a second and pay attention to things that happen in the real world. Okay? in a lot of relationships, you have a couple, they don't talk, they don't communicate, they don't express their feelings with each other. Okay. Maybe the guy isn't being as much of a man as he could be. He's not being maybe a total bitch, but he's not being as much of a man as he could be. The woman still has feelings for him, but maybe she's not super attracted to him. And I'm using an example on that direction, but it can actually go the other direction as well, right? Woman doesn't take care of herself. She doesn't want to have sex. The guy goes and has an affair. In some situations, and I would say no more than 20%, 10 to 20%, that this happens, it comes out in the open. And what it does is actually improves the relationship. Now, it's not in the Jack Murphy way that people are talking about in the chat. It's in the sense that it wakes everybody up to what's going on. So I gave you the example of this guy I know, and he didn't wake up from the experience. But that might have been actually a situation where he could have woken up. And if he really saw, hey, I was really being he was being really unattractive. And so she doesn't like that she does it. She apologizes. He forgives her. And here's another thing that people don't understand is that when she wants you to forgive her, she doesn't want you to leave her when she gets caught. There's a frame shift that happens. Now, again, this is not how you should gain frame in a relationship, but it's a simple observation that a woman isn't happy, so she makes a bad decision, she goes and cheats. The guy maybe has, on one hand, he's obviously pissed at her, but on the other hand, has awareness that he was part of the problem and isn't at the point of ready to leave her yet. Or maybe he doesn't want to leave her. Maybe he wants to change things, but he's still pissed. And so what can happen is that as a result of her cheating, she loses like the moral authority of being the wounded party in the relationship. And so her behavior towards him changes. I worked with a client before, and this was well before we worked together, but he was telling me about some of his past history, and he squandered this opportunity, but that happened to him. When she was caught, she was very, very submissive and did not want things to end. He had an opportunity to shift the dynamic then, and he could have permanently shifted it. And the couples that do that, which is, again, a small percentage, but you guys should understand that these things actually happen, and stop reading theory all the time if that's what you guys are doing. This stuff actually happens. They end up having a really good relationship because they will be able to honestly say that the relationship wouldn't have been saved unless they went through a near-death experience. And if you guys need some correlation to that, look at it from health. A lot of people won't do anything to take care of their bodies until they have a near-death experience because of their habits, and then they suddenly change their habits. And some of those people will complain like, well, I had this thing and now my life is over. It's like, well, no, you built up to that thing. You created that thing occurred, and now you're still a loser and you're going to die. Other people have that event and they say, you know what? That woke me up. And now I'm going to stop eating, seed oils. I'm going to stop eating shit. I'm going to take care of my body. And they can credit that event with saving their life. Sometimes in couples, again, not fucking condoning cheating. I'm not saying this is the way it should happen. I'm just telling you guys, in the real world, there's a percentage of couples that cheating becomes a vector to their own growth. What I do is sometimes I work with guys who have the situation, but mostly I work with guys to make sure they don't get into the situation where it has to go that far. Just like a fitness coach wouldn't let his patient get, severe diabetes or severe heart disease before he'd have him start to work out.
Yeah, this is triggering. I see to the chat. I get that. But like you said, it's a small percentage.
Yeah.
It's it's a touchy subject. I mean, you know, for me, I think, and again, I can say this with a lot of conviction that when let's say a guy's going through this, what you have to understand as another guy is that he's feeling what he's feeling right now, and there's nothing you can say. How many times, and I've been through it, where it's like you just got to leave her, that kind of thing, and the guy resists
Yeah.
immediately,
Yeah.
and that's a fact. And I know everybody in the chat tell me that hasn't happened to you. Maybe you haven't lived long enough. A lot of you guys are younger, but I know that's a fact, and I've seen it in my lifetime many times. And I think there's a process that everybody has to go through. And I think if one of your friends get cheated on or something like that, we're going to go over the woman's side too. But you have to kind of stick with him at first. You really have to do that. You just can't, you know, everybody wants to say, you know, just leave her, you know, pack your shit and go, or, you know, kick her out of the fucking house. But a lot of times there's more to it than that. That's, you know, and I've seen that personally, like I said.
Well, yeah. So let me take a different context here, because people are getting super triggered because we're talking about one context, and there's a lot of like both parties still have strong feelings for each other, and they want to work through it. And by the way, if you haven't been in a relationship for like 20 years or whatever, you're probably not going to be going through something like that. Um, a lot of what happens when you see a girl as bad news for a guy and you tell the guy to leave her and he doesn't do it and the girl cheats on him, that relationship is done. And so he is a bitch for not leaving her, right? But as a human, you also understand that he may need more time to wake up and extract himself from that situation, right? And extract himself from the situation. It's, you know, I say what I said at the very beginning, because we're dealing with a lot of nuance here. I would personally not tolerate cheating in a relationship. It's very clear, it's been established from the very beginning of the relationship. And I've never had it happen to me, and I would never go through with it, right? But I'm just saying, I have seen this stuff happen, and I have seen some guys come out of it. That is not the majority. That's not the norm. Most guys, when a woman cheats on them, they need to get the fuck out of the situation, because the woman is not being honest about the situation anyway. I'm describing a situation here where the woman comes clean, or she's caught, she admits it all, she explains why she did it, she says she doesn't want to leave. There's this whole sort of thing, and maybe the guy really has just been a crap for years, hasn't done things, he realizes it. That's a breakthrough. That's not the norm. The norm is that the woman does that, the guy doesn't understand, and so he's either a bitch and she keeps on cheating, or she leaves him, or what happens is that she cheats on him and she could care two fucks about him, and she either keeps on doing it or then leaves for that guy or whatever. And so the guy, by staying in the relationship, is only submitting himself to further abuse. And you guys have to understand that there are different contexts you have to operate in. It's in the same way that somebody's on your property, do you shoot them? Well, what the fuck are they doing on your property? Did a 10-year-old kid throw his ball in the property? I mean, it's a bad example, but the point is that you always have to think in context, and you have to look at the dynamics, what exactly is going on in the situation. You can't accept bad behavior from a woman. You can't accept allowing yourself to be degraded and humiliated by a woman. The question is simply, how much is actually there left in the relationship by the time she cheats? Right? How much is there? How much gas is left there? A lot of guys are so completely clueless And the woman herself may even be clueless. There's 10% of the time, but it happens. It's happened. I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen these relationships, and it is pretty crazy. But 9 out of 10 times, you gotta, the guy's got to get the fuck out of there as fast as possible. It's just the way it is.
Let me ask you a question now. When it comes to, I'm going to back up a little. The difference, like, let's say you catch your woman cheating on you, and she comes clean. Okay.
Well, she comes clean, right? I mean, you can't.
Well, exactly. That's not, now, of course she is. Not all, but most of the time it's going to be like, once you're busted, it's like, that whole, I'm busted. Now I'll go ahead and give you my reasons why.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So there's obviously difference between, I guess you would say, is what you're trying to say is basically a woman telling you versus you catching her and then she tells you. That's a different, I think that's a whole different dynamic.
It is a whole different dynamic. I mean, look, I can't, it's difficult for me to get into the mind of a guy who walks in on his wife with another guy and decides to stay with her. It's like difficult for me to understand that mind. To me, the biggest thing about it is I want to make sure I explain this correctly.
Looking at the chat, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's not coming clean. It's getting exposed. It's not coming clean. I mean, I just look. When a woman is with another guy, when you're with her, then it's like she's not your woman anymore. And so it's almost as if the entire relationship has to be renegotiated. If you've been somebody who's married, you have multiple kids, this happens, it's been a long time deterioration. I'm just saying that because I've seen this in real time, if the woman is really open to, she's apologetic, she wants to save the marriage, then the guy, if he chooses, and that's the guy's choice, to take a cost benefits analysis of what is it to leave, what does he leave, what does he have to gain, then that guy might be able to actually create a good relationship. And maybe he goes off first and he hooks up with some girls. And maybe he evens the score. And then they build from there. And that's a pretty common thing, frankly. Usually when that happens, the guy needs to go out and even the score. And then they can reestablish something. But again, I want to say this for like the 10th time at this point. This is, I don't want to get hung up on it, frankly, but this isn't a really common experience. 9 out of 10 times when a woman cheats on a man, it's over. You got to understand it's over. You should have understood it was over before she cheated, because it was over, and you got to leave her. Okay. These are exceptions to the rule. They're not the norm. And, like people said in the chat, she's been exposed. She's not going to tell you most of the time. She's not going to, unless she really, I mentioned the thing that she tells you because she's not going to tell you unless she really wanted to stay with you. You still have a decision to make, but she's not going to tell you if she doesn't want to be a part of it, then she's not going to tell you that she cheated on you. She's just going to keep cheating on you, or she's going to bury that event. And that's why what is worse in some ways than the physical cheating is the deception, because the deception is 100% no exceptions. Like you're done. And I think any guy who's in that kind of thing should really pay attention to that, should be aware of that. So,
all right, I've got it. Like I said, I got a lot of notes here. sometimes, and this is going to trigger the chat for sure, is it best not to know? Because that's a tough one right there, man. Like I said, I've been taking notes for like a week. Do you see what I'm saying? I think some guys would say, I've had guys say that to me.
I know.
I wish I've never known. I would have been better off.
I mean,
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying.
No, I know.
Yeah.
The chat's gonna lose their shit. I mean, about this stuff. These are just these questions. My fundamental answer is no. I mean, I don't. I think if you don't know, you're not better off.
Okay.
It's always better off to know. It's always better off to know. I mean, I'll give an example though of some things that some couples do with oversharing. You know, if people are more of like an anxious attachment style, I've seen some relationships and they will when they're trying to like deal with a lot of their emotional baggage, so they'll start to share like, well, you know, I talked to this person and I kissed them once this time. And you know, one time I did this and one time, you know, they overshare stuff. I gave this you know, video what I think the line is. And I think anytime you cross the line, honesty needs to be given. I think if you maybe did something inappropriate, that you have to, and I don't actually know that this is a full on, let me put it this way. I'm open to disagreement on this one, but if you said something you shouldn't have said to a girl, do you have to go and then you realize like, fuck, I shouldn't have said that. That wasn't right. Do you have to go and tell your significant other? Is that better for the significant other? I don't know. I don't know in every case it is. Here's one thing when it comes to, and I think this is the argument that you are probably considering, Tony, which is like the ethics of admission to certain things. And this is an argument people have made. And I think it's really interesting. I don't know that I personally agree with it, but that telling somebody what you did is putting a burden on them. And so you're actually absolving your own conscience by telling them, by admitting it. And that's more selfish than if you had not told them. And I think that's like, I guess, a really gray area. It's like, at what point is the disrespect ephemeral versus at what point is it like a legitimate thing? So that's like the cheating line, right? Maybe you got a little too, maybe you said the wrong thing. You got a little too close to a girl. You shouldn't have done that. Do you have to go say it to your girl? Is that going to create more problems than it solves?
So
question.
Let's flip the whole script.
Yeah.
From the first part, and now let's put it now. The man cheats on the woman. How does it change?
How does it relate?
Well, like what we were talking about, just flip the whole script on now the man is cheating on the woman. Okay. How should she deal with it is the question. Should a woman deal with it differently than a man does?
Well, I won't say that she should deal with it differently, but she usually does deal with it differently.
Yeah.
You know, I consider it bad across the board. Just how I am. I know a lot of guys in the manosphere think it's a much lesser offense for a guy. I don't believe that on a spiritual level. But I also acknowledge on a biological level it's different. It is different on a biological level. And going back to the initial point that we talked about, I do think guys are more capable of sleeping with another woman. They compartmentalize it very differently than women do. It's my perspective on it. I mean, I think some of the guys here, when they were dating multiple women, like a lot of guys could probably fairly say that they could date a bunch of different women and that they could compartmentalize levels of feelings for each of them and that they could deal with them in different ways, right?
Here is a typical manosphere. That's a typical manosphere thing, right there. Uncle Guns is very typical. Men don't cheat. Men only fuck. Women betray. I get what you're saying. That's so typical of red pill philosophy.
Yeah.
Which I get it. I do. But I don't think that's 100% real life. I truly don't.
But well, women feel betrayed too. I mean, like you could say that a lot of women who are more down in their biology might accept that, okay, well, they get you for in a certain capacity, but then you also have other women. And look, if you want to set those parameters from the very beginning, you're welcome to do that. You know, you're welcome to be honest with a woman from the very beginning that she's going to be part of the rotation and part of the harem, and that's what she can expect, and fair enough, right? But women feel betrayal. I think it's different. I think the issue is that how men. Okay, here's where we get into something that'll be interesting. Betrayal is very much a word for a man. Women are not. Okay, so loyalty, honor is very much a male ethical trait. You could say chastity is a female moral trait, but honor is a male moral trait. So when we talk about betrayal, we talk about somebody who's a snake, somebody who you expected something of, who didn't do it, right? And I think part of the problem is that a lot of guys will look at women and they will project masculine virtues onto them. And I'm not saying that that means that women are just completely amoral. They have their own sort of thing, but I don't really hear about women in betrayal. Like I don't really hear a woman ever use that term. It's very much a male term. I trusted you. We were in the foxhole together. You betrayed me. And in affairs of the heart, I think you have to get more granular in the sense of how the two of you will expect a man, for instance, who you trust to hold the line, right? Under a certain situation. Whereas, and if he were to turn the other side, that would be betrayal. But a woman, you wouldn't expect her to do that, or you shouldn't expect her to do that. Not to say you wouldn't expect her to be loyal, but it's like a different kind of loyalty than I think I don't want to get into the weeds with the semantics here, but when I see betrayal, it's like a woman betrayed me. Like, well, what kind of, sounds like you were looking at her to act as a man when I see that. Like, women are very predictable in what they're going to respond to, and not all women are going to cheat when their hypergamy, so to speak, is violated, but they are going to experience the desire to separate themselves from you when it happens. And they might do it you could say, in a moral way, where they say, look, I'm not attracted to you anymore. I don't want to be in this. I could have done this. I didn't do it. But I don't know.
I'm curious. I'm curious, like in the chat, and I'll call out some of the chat. I have no problem with that.
Some of this stuff is retarded, honestly.
These guys,
like retarded people in here.
These guys, a lot of these guys are my friends. But what happens is now, let's say, and I've seen this happen too, where a guy cheats on his woman, okay, and of course he'll puff up and say, fuck her. If she finds out, it doesn't matter. But most of the time, those are the guys that are biggest suck ups to the woman when they get busted. And that's in my experience.
Totally.
And that's a fact. Again, we can say what you want in the chat, but I've lived 59 years on this earth and I've seen a whole lot. And that's a fact, is that when a guy gets caught cheating, a lot of guys will do anything they can to keep that woman that he cheated on.
This is a great thing here, Tony, and this is a good way to move into this. So why do people cheat to begin with? Mm-hmm. The two halves of attraction are desire and comfort. Now, a lot of the game guys think it's only desire, but it's desire and comfort. They both matter. There's a certain sequence you might want to lead with, right? But they both matter. And as you get into longer term relationships, a lot of the red pill guys don't understand that in, I would say, frankly, a majority of the issues where you have like dead bedroom, bad crap in relationships, it's not necessarily desire that's at issue as much as comfort. But
let me pause you here. Guns, relax, will you? Stop being a retard. All right, relax. Okay?
Guns, I wasn't talking about you. Actually, I wasn't talking about you.
I mean, come on. If you can't handle the word retard, then you're on the wrong platform.
But look, you guys are in here saying, Pat says no, you can't just say no, you ruin your chance with the beautiful princess. No, you autist, no. I mean, this is retarded. Like, sorry, Alexia, it's a retarded statement. Like, I know you're probably just shitposting, and, I see some funny things in here you're also saying, which is fair enough. But, like, I'm trying to help you guys to be... I'm trying to help you guys to see another perspective here. I'm not telling you guys to be fucking simps. I'm not telling you, like, what have I said fundamentally here? I've said I would not accept it. I would say I don't think you should accept it. And I would say 90% of situations don't call on you to accept it. I'm giving you guys the 10% because if you don't think about the 10%, then you can really get yourself into some messy situations. And maybe I'm talking to a different cat boy. He's pretty funny, actually. Cat boy enthusiast. That's pretty funny, actually. I'm trying to give you guys a broader perspective on these things because the real world is messy. It's complicated. Love is complicated. Your most alpha guy, as Tony's saying, will cheat on his girl and he'll act like it's no big deal. And then he gets caught and he does not want that girl to leave him. And he's desperate for her not to leave him because guys and women, men and women, both want desire and comfort. And unfortunately, in a lot of relationships, they only get one of those two things. So, and this is one of the reasons why, we always hear this thing that affairs almost never become full-on relationships. So like you can be in a marriage and you have a mistress and maybe over time you start to fall more and more for your mistress. But if you marry your mistress, everything gets fucked up. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Because actually the mistress and the wife were both giving different things. And you see this in a lot of cultures, Madonna whore complex. I'm not singling out a specific ethnic group. I'm just telling you my experience. When I was living in Morocco, a lot of the Arab guys there would talk about how, Moroccan women were perfect. They were pure, and Western women were total sluts. And, and they would be like, literally, this is back in like the internet cafe days, and they'd be fucking jerking off. And they'd be talking about this stuff about like Western women. They had this idea that their local women had no sexual impulse and they were totally pure and they were just going to have children and they'd be great. And meanwhile, they could go fuck the sluts on the side. Now, a lot of guys in the manosphere actually think that that's totally okay and normal, but I'm telling you, it's no different than a woman who decides she wants to be with a beta bucks and fuck some bad boy retard on the side who doesn't have anything going for him, who just, whatever, is good in bed or treats her like shit and gives her that spark. A healthy relationship has both elements. It has both elements to it. And so even this big alpha, he can talk a good game to his friends. He can go off with his sexual girl, but emotionally, he's very tied to the comfort his wife gives. And so if he loses that, he loses his anchor. And then you know what happens? This is why the mistress thing doesn't work out, is that then if he puts any of that energy towards the mistress, she gets repelled from him. So he's compartmentalizing himself. He's not really alpha, because in his marriage, he's acting like a different man, and he's trying to compartmentalize his alphaness with this random girl because he can't bring it in his own marriage. Understand? This is the validation aspect of sex that I was talking about at the very beginning, the emotionality. The reason that guys cheat, it's emotional. And they love sex, and they want women to be very sexual with them. And part of that is sex drive, but a lot of it is the emotional validation. And that is the reason, by the way, that guys will get into relationships with women who have borderline personality disorder, because those women will hook the validation, both sexually and in other ways, and then they can pull it back, and that's how they can toy with a guy. I have never met a single man who has been with a borderline personality disorder girl who has not said it was the best sex of their life. Never met it. I mean, up there at least. And yet they would never say they wanted to repeat it because it's super compartmentalized.
Mm-hmm. Alexio, yeah, Michael Foster is coming on here shortly. So just you guys sit tight. And yeah, so Foster's going to be coming on shortly, just so you know. But yeah, so I had so I've seen the relationships fail where I've seen it both ways. I've seen men and women cheat on their husband, their wife, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, then get in a relationship with the person that they cheated on.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say 9 out of 10 times, even 99 out of 100, it doesn't work. It never works.
I have used like the planet analogy, and you kind of look at, I mean, it's just kind of nerdy, but you look at planets and they have a gravitational sort of, like they're all in this sort of gravitational alignment. You might be like, you and this other thing might be rotating around each other, but you take this other object, this other planet out of the picture, and everything just flies apart. It never works out. And that's why, I don't usually work in these capacities, but when I see guys do this stuff, I'm like, take it, understand what it is that you're involved in. It's the reason that it's a historical thing for a man to have a wife and a mistress is because there is a certain, I would say, resignation that a lot of guys have that you just can't get both from a woman. And so you have to get one for the other. And so you have the situation where the Madonna, the wife, well, she's like, well, you know what? I don't even care about the whore. He wants to have a mistress. He can have a mistress, but I have the title. My children are going to inherit. I have the status, and she's just some dumb slut. And the mistress says, well, I don't have any of that stuff, but he wants to spend his time with me because I know how to make him feel like a man. And that's, and they hate each other. The Madonna and the whore hate each other, and the guy's in the middle like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, but I understand it's difficult, but you can get both in a woman, but you have to deal with, when you have a woman who's more on the whore side, you have to bring out more of the Madonna. When you have a woman that's more on the Madonna side, you have to bring out the whore. Otherwise, just in the same way that if you're a guy who's more a provider or more comfort, you don't create as much tension, versus if you're a guy who's really just, self-focused all the time, doing your own shit. There's a balance to this. A healthy relationship exists in the middle of these two extremes. And I would say healthy relationships exist anywhere between 2-to-1 in each direction. Some relationships are healthy 2-to-1 Madonna whore. Others are 2-to-1 whore Madonna. But when you get to the extremes, you end up saying, I can't get in this person. I need somebody else. It's just how it works.
All right. I got another question for you. Let's talk about long distance. Long distance relationships, and we'll say men and women with travel jobs. In other words, a lot of traveling.
God damn it.
Doesn't that increase the odds of infidelity and cheating?
80% of cheating is situation. So if you mitigate the situation where someone would cheat, then you've mitigated 80% of where it will happen. So look, human nature is human nature. Unless your relationship is really locked in, and I'll add that it might be tough if you guys are traveling all the time, you're really opening yourself up to risk. Traveling and work trips are notorious. They're just absolutely notorious for sleeping around. I don't say that to make guys paranoid. I say to make guys aware. So if you're with a girl and she has to go on some work trips, you shouldn't be like, she fucked every guy in the company when she was on the work trip. You shouldn't think that. But you should be paying attention to what's going on in her work environment. You should be paying attention to her behavior. And because the risk is higher. I mean, it is certainly higher. I don't like it. I don't like it as a relationship standard. There's going to be some exceptions. There's going to be some people who understand each other, some couples that understand each other. I don't personally like it. I would not want to be with it. I don't think a work trip or two a year is a big deal, but you have some jobs where people are traveling once a month, maybe more. It doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't mean it, but it's just, you got to watch out for that stuff. Now, long distance relationships. I've always said this about long distance relationships. Long distance relationships are temporary, and do not get into one unless you are prepared to end it. What I mean is find a way to end the long distance. When I hear people saying like, well, we really like each other, but she's going to this place for the next 5 years and I'm going to this place. Like, well, you're just fucking idiot. You're a fucking idiot. Like, get out of the relationship. You guys are going completely different directions. What do you expect is going to happen? It's going to end. It's inevitable. It's going to end. I know of one exception, and it is such an exception that I don't even consider it a data point as an exception. I can't believe it happened. I mean, this is a friend of mine who was with his high school girlfriend for over a decade long distance. I do not understand how they did it. Do not understand it. Long distance needs to have an end date, but I'm okay with long distance in the short term. If there's a point, if there's an end goal in mind, if you say, we're going to be in the same location, we're going to do this for the long term, we're going to get married, we're going to do this for the long term, then long distance makes sense to me, because that's just part of that deeper commitment. But open-ended long distance is just absurdity. It's absurd, my opinion.
Yeah, I've told actually a few people that recently, but in the past year, but they pay no attention to me.
They got to learn. They got to learn the hard way.
Well, that's what I say. So I want to welcome Michael Foster to this. Michael Foster, how you doing? Good to have you.
Good to see you, Michael.
Doing well. Good to see you, Tony and Pat.
Yeah, so we've been getting deep already.
Yeah, I heard a tiny bit of it.
Yeah. So,
Tony, I'm gonna go jump to the bathroom real quick, and I'll grab a drink myself. And
okay. All right.
return.
Sounds good. So, welcome, Michael Foster. And yeah, so we were diving deep into cheating. We had a lot of pushback from the chat. I get it. We do have this.
Oh yeah.
Well, we have this. We have this masculine bravado in the manosphere, and I get that. I do. I get that. We have a lot of. I call it masculine bravado, and we had talked about, well, if this happened to me, I wouldn't do that. I get that. And Pat was explaining like it's a very rare case to where when the woman cheats, there's a reason. You know what I mean? So the way he explained it, I have to go back. I can't explain it good. But we did get a lot of pushback in the chat, which I like. So let's talk about I know I had talked to you about this before about cheating, period. Whether it comes to, I don't know if you make a distinction as a pastor. Do you make a distinction between like married or a couple, like boyfriend and girlfriend, when it comes to cheating? Can you make a distinction there?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, because in marriage, you have made a vow before God. You made a covenant. You made a vow before a bunch of people. And we just don't care about vows anymore. We don't care about contracts and covenants. People don't respect them at all. And so the whole purpose of a marriage. So here's something that's kind of interesting. So back in, if you do a study of how marriage ceremonies and practice developed, they're not what they are today. They've changed and evolved quite a bit to how we got here. But during the Protestant Reformation, early Protestant Reformation, you had something that was called haystack weddings. So basically, a guy would be at a bar, and this guy would say to this woman, "Hey, I want to marry you, right? You want to marry me?" She'd say, "Yeah, all right, let's go see the deal in the barn, in the haystack." And they go have sex. And so the vow and the consummation of the relationship was treated as something pretty close, pretty much marriage. Then they would go back, and she's like, "Now we're married." He's like, "I don't know what you're talking about," right? And like deny that he had sex with this woman, and it became such an issue that a lot of the pastors and magistrates in these kind of city states like there were Geneva, Strasbourg, whatever, got really concerned about it. And then there was a lot of bigamy going on because guys during that sort of 1500s, 1600s, there was a lot of moving around Europe just because it was an unstable time. So a guy would get married, in Paris, get persecuted, flee to Geneva without the wife, marry some other woman. So he had two wives now, and they didn't allow for polygamy. So then what would happen is the idea of even rings, the idea of having witnesses at a ceremony, it being officiated by a pastor, and all those things. That those sort of marriage rituals evolved in that kind of late medieval period, going into the Renaissance Reformation period, is where they come from. And the whole point of that is, I almost want to be at a wedding one time where someone, this hasn't happened yet to me, but where the minister or I say, "Does anyone have any reason these two shouldn't be joined?" And someone raise their hand, right? Because the idea is your friends got your back, your community.
Yeah.
And I think we have to move back to something that's like quasi arranged marriage, long term. And so emphasis on the quasi, because it's like, it used to be that your mom and dad ran interference for you. Like we've let Hollywood pollute our mind. Oh, they don't, everyone's Romeo and Juliet. But a lot of those arranged marriages led to a lot of happier marriages because mom and dad are looking out for each other. Oh, it's just political. It's just economic. That's BS. That's not that's an aspect. But of course, economy is an aspect, right? As how many problems in marriage are around finances and the inability to provide. And so mom and dad are looking out, seeing their early 20 something daughter and looking out for the 30-year-old version of her, looking out for the 40-year-old version that's going to want a a stable household and someone that can take care of them and whatever. And so we're going to have to move back to where our community is a little more deeply involved. But I'd like to see someone say that in a marriage. And then I'd also like someone to hold someone to their vows. And Emily and I, we hit some hard times in our marriage. There wasn't infidelity or anything, but we did remind each other when we were considering divorce that we had taken vows before God. And we really are Christians. We really have been washed by the blood. We believe in God. We all will stand before him. We'll have to answer for our every word, thought, and deed. And that was a motive, one of the many motives in working things out. We still loved each other. We just fought like cats and dogs. We're just young and stupid and working through things. So a guy that has made that vow to a woman, or a woman that's made that vow to a guy, said you and you alone, sickness and death, all that stuff, and she breaks that, that is not equal in my mind to a boyfriend and girlfriend thing, which at its nature is conditional commitment, right? Not that a marriage isn't a conditional commitment. There is a condition, but the condition is you and you alone, sickness and death, rich or poor, where a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship is the assumption in most cases is that it's temporary nowadays, right? And what we really have is kind of serial monogamy in a lot of relationships where they just hook up with one person for a time and then they hook up with another person for a time and whatever. So I wouldn't want to treat that level of cheating as the same. I don't think it is. Is it a violation of trust? It is, but to be fair, did you even communicate that it's an exclusive relationship? It's funny. We're backing into marriage. We're backing into marriage. All these guys that whine about cheating when their girlfriend cheats on them, I got to tell you, my compassion and mercy is kind of, it's conditional too. Okay. Right. It's conditional. Oh, they shouldn't cheat. Like, I don't understand. Like, why shouldn't they cheat? What's your moral grounding? What's your worldview? Where do you get your morality from? Why do you keep talking about right and wrong? Where does right and wrong come from? Where do you even have some of this stuff? Especially these people that everything's evolution. Everything's evolution. Like, cheat all you want, right? Why wouldn't you? If you're just a high level animal,
We're just bonobos.
yeah. If you're just bonobos, you're just lions. You just got to spread your seed, and you hear that crap from some of these, these anon, these guys on Twitter that we all know that the majority of them are just half copywriters that copy other people, and they really don't. But I don't have as much mercy for those guys as I do for the guys that did commit to a woman and did try to be faithful, because two of the big myths are men are sexual hounds that can't control themselves, and that women have no sexual desires that need to be met. Right? Those are two huge myths. Men need intimacy. One reason a man is so offended by a woman responding to him like with starfish sex, where she just lays there, is because he feels like he's raping her.
Yeah. Yeah.
He feels like he's violating her. He feels like she doesn't want it, and he wants her to want him. Right? So it's the lack of intimacy. He wants passion, no doubt about it. Right? He heats up really easy. But he wants it to be intimate. And a guy that says, yeah, I'm committed to you and you alone, and tries to keep it in that relationship. I know a lot of guys that avoid pornography. Like, even if it does come into their life, it's rare. It's not like a daily, weekly sort of problem, even monthly. And I think these guys, then this woman who they give their, a woman does give her youthful beauty away and to a man, and a man gives his strength, and that's good. That's natural. But a woman can get pretty antsy when that beauty starts to fail, and if she starts to see some of her peers with husbands that are higher status and kind of moving up in the world, they can do some crazy things, and the church won't hear it. It's starting to, slowly but surely.
Yeah.
Because it's such an epidemic right now.
Out of
It's
necessity. Out of necessity.
and it's they're being forced into saying, all right, this is actually a decent guy. I think this woman's crazy. But then they've acted like, well, yeah, in extreme cases, they think of that woman, but now they got 5 of those women. Right? Like it's getting harder and harder to explain it away. And it's because of we live in a society that is narcissistic, sociopathic. We live in a society that has no regard for tradition, no regard for your word and the value of keeping promises. But yeah, it's dishonest and deceptive by nature. So those guys have my mercy. I'll go to bat for those guys big time. And I know a lot of good Christian men. I'll tell you a really extreme story. I know a homeschool girl. I don't know her personally. I know who she is because of a pastoral associate somewhere in the United States relayed this whole thing to me, and we talked about what was going on. Basically, this girl marries this guy, nice Christian guy, and I don't mean nice as a pejorative here, just like a kind, decent dude, not ugly, not fat, works his butt off, whatever. Still young. They're both 20, 22, somewhere in that area. And the girl is homeschooled her entire life, church her whole life, active parents. As they investigated the parents, they could not find any sexual abuse in her past. They couldn't. The marriage of the mom and dad seemed to be strong, right? All these things, and yet within the first 3 or 4 months of being married to this guy, she had sex with 3 different men, and one of them for money, right? One of them for a couple $100, and this is in the conservative of the conservative side of the church, the side of the church I move in, and so and this pastor, a very good man, was like, "How common is this?" Because he knows that I'm plugged into it, and I said, "Man, it is way more common than anyone wants to admit." And she, there's a lot of things going on there. She wants to feel sexy. She wants to feel powerful. She wants to have an adventure. She's been corrupted by TikTok nonsense. There's a lot of different things going on there.
Not really, concealed from the modern world.
No, you can't. You can't. That's the thing. That's why Texas can't secede from the nation, right? Yeah. If it still has Netflix, it's still America.
Yeah.
It's still the West. We still you have to change the culture, change the media, change all that. And so, but that's what we can't. This is everywhere. It is everywhere, and it's not just men. And now that makes people think, why get married then, right? And then you back into kind of the black pill side of things in the MGTOW world. And everyone I think on this, all of us here have a lot of compassion and understand how they get there. And I don't mind that a man goes his own way. I don't at all. Just don't cry about it all the time. And let other men, if other men decide they want to get married, I mean, that's the way they want to go. So don't talk them down. So those are just some introductory thoughts on it.
Yeah. Pat, just so you know, the first question I asked Michael was, I don't know if you heard it while you're away, but is there a difference between cheating when you're married versus boyfriend, girlfriend type relationship? I don't know if you want to.
I heard the tail end of what Michael said with that. It's actually one of those things that I've changed my position on in the last year and a half, probably. What is actually being a boyfriend and girlfriend at the end of the day? What level? I think that there's been this sort of weird middle ground where people weren't getting married, but then they were trying to enforce the same level of commitment on being boyfriend, girlfriend. Then I'll tell you, one of the catalyst moments for me to really think about this was a client who met this girl and they had a really strong connection, but she was in a relationship and they, and we were cautious not to violate anything too much here, because you can kind of spoil what you might get at the end of the day. But it was very apparent that the guy she was with was not moving things forward in any meaningful way. He had all sorts of, I mean, from what I understand, he was like, addicted to porn, video game, a lot of common stuff, and really just wasn't showing up. And my client was. And so then you have this situation, this moral code. Well, can he make a move? Is he allowed to make a move? Is it dishonorable for him to make a move? And I had to be challenged with my normal conventional thought, which was that, you shouldn't get involved with a woman who is in a relationship. But then I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, they're not married. And where is this going? And why shouldn't he make his move? I mean, it's kind of like saying, you're buying a house and you say that, well, I talked to the realtor. Well, you didn't buy the fucking house. So engagements may be under contract, but it's still not sold. And fast forward, what happened? She dumped her boyfriend. They're married. They have a son today. So was that wrong? Was it wrong for that to occur? I got a lot of flack when I justified it, when I said it was correct for him to proceed because he had stronger intentions for her and her own happiness than the guy she was with. I think, of course, you could try to extend that logic into a marriage, but as Michael said, there's different contractual obligations that are involved with things. It's not to say that it's completely immutable, but I'll be personal here, because Michael was being really honest about stuff that he was going through at a certain point in his marriage. And by the way, if you haven't been married, then don't comment on it, because you're so exposed to yourself through a marriage that it's very alchemical. You're going to change quite a bit in the course of it. And you're going to go through periods where you're going to go like this because you're burning through a lot of your BS. I'm not sure that if I hadn't been married to my wife, because we got married very fast, I'm not sure if we hadn't done that, if we would have made it through that. And thank fucking God we were married, because if we hadn't done that, we would have missed out on where we're at right now, which is really beautiful and such a deeper layer of connection than before. So,
yeah, I mean, I was married. I had probably the easiest divorce and whatever you want to call it of anybody. We just sat down one night and then said it ain't working out, and basically get out of my house in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it was actually pretty painless, pretty simple. And I'll say that definitely toward the end, I was only married for a couple of years. I wasn't faithful at all, and in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I just wasn't.
Yeah.
I knew it was over.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was before we said it was over.
Yeah.
So I definitely wasn't faithful. We'll say the last quarter. And that's a fact, but I knew it was done, and so did she. So I don't think it didn't affect the final score. Let's just say the whole game.
Sure.
But painless, no big deal. In fact, it's almost so painless, I feel like I was never married. If that makes any sense. Like it's a part.
How long were you married for?
Like 2 years.
Yeah.
And then it was just it just went downhill after that. And the funny part is that the sex part never left.
Sure.
That never left. But it was just a connection that was not there. It was gone. It was over. But just totally painless. Didn't cost me a lot of money. Got to keep my house that I paid for, and it's been good.
Have you read?
I don't have one of those horrible divorce stories. I just don't. I don't have one. So.
Have you read Esther Perel, Pat?
She's the Argentinian woman.
She's like Belgian, I think, but she sounds
Oh
Argentina.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's actually in my notes. That was one of my. She's I think a psychotherapist, if I'm
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, a sex therapist and family therapist, and she
Mhm.
she has a really I think the #1 TED Talk on. She wrote a book called Mating in Captivity. A great
Yeah.
title, by the way. And then The State of Affairs, and she looks at why people cheat, and it's
Mhm.
not like actually people in happy marriages will cheat and not fully understand why they did it initially
Mhm.
because of
Mhm.
subconscious reasons, and that would, based on the counseling I've done, that would uh, play out in several ones I can think of. But I've been working through her stuff lately, kind of thinking through this because I'm prepping for a book on marriage.
I'm glad you mentioned that because one of my notes is from one of her things that I watched this week, and it's about how how when somebody cheats on you, they I'm trying to think how she put this. Reduce the other person. Okay, does that make sense? That's kind of what she said. Um, let me see if I have it right here. Yeah, she reduces the other person, um, even after all the good things that happened. In other words, I don't know if I liked her explanation on this, the way she put it. It kind of made me feel a little uncomfortable. I'm like, I don't know about that. You know, I'm still, I'm still, I'm still not quite there where I think it's the same if a woman cheats versus a man cheating. I'm just, I just don't think it's the same at all.
Well, my perspective on it is that on a spiritual level, it's the same,
Yeah. Yeah.
but on a biological level, it's different.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I guess
And
that's the best way that I could put it too. I think that as people, like you said, a spiritual level, um, it could be for the same reasons, but biologically, it feels worse if a woman is to cheat on a guy than a guy to cheat on the woman. It just does. And that maybe that's the male perspective, but I think that's maybe the perspective of even if you were talking to an honest woman, I I would say that the chances of a marriage or a relationship staying together if the guy cheated is greater than the relationship staying together if the woman cheated.
I would bet I would bet that's not true statistically.
Mhm,
Here's like well, first off, your logic. I understand the boat where both
mhm,
y'all are coming from, and there is, I think, the height of male sexual sin seems to be personified in unnatural acts in
mhm,
scripture, like bestiality or homosexuality.
Mhm.
Where with women, it kind of reaches its height in whoredom, right?
Mhm.
Multiple partners, Betty Martin, in particular, when she is a married woman, in particular. That's like, and so I think there's some obvious reasons you can think there why like why it's consequence or so consequential. But I have seen men willing to stay with the woman that's cheated on them. I would say most Christian men I've run into have been willing to do that. So I think there's two levels there. There's a sort of effeminacy, right? That like that's been beat into him. That anytime a woman does something wrong, it's his fault. So I make a distinction between responsibility and fault. I say a man's responsible for everything that happens at his house,
Hmm.
right? So if your wife cheats on you, you're responsible for it. But what I mean by that, you're responsible to deal with it. You got to
Yeah.
decide,
Yeah.
right? You got to decide, like, if you're gonna stay divorced or not, how are you gonna react to it? That doesn't mean you're the fault. You didn't cause it. So think of
That's
like a cat.
that's that's basically what Pat was saying at the beginning. I mean, that's really
Yeah.
what you were
Yeah,
saying in a nutshell.
but Michael put it better. That's a good verbal distinction between the two terms.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like a captain of a ship. If someone underneath his command acts the fool, it's his it's his responsibility to deal with it. It could be his fault. Maybe he's been overlooking things. Maybe he chose the wrong sailor, right? But it also might just be that that person of their own agency acted the fool, and it's his responsibility. And so, so a lot of times when we say, I say a man's responsible for it, they think I'm saying it's their fault. I don't think that's the case. Not always. I think it could be though. I think if you're not engaging a woman's what this is kind of what Esther Perel seems to be saying. I'm digging in deep and have a lot to stew on it. But there's things that make arousal and sexual tension in a marriage work and things that don't. And if you don't give that to a man, he'll be tempted to stray eventually. You don't give that to a woman, she'll be tempted to stray eventually. Or more likely, they'll be vulnerable. I do go out of town. I travel a lot. But I always travel with a guy, and I seriously, when I travel, I work probably like 16 hours a day, right? I work like a ton of hours, and I do go to the trade show parties that I'm at, but I don't ever go to the after party. Never go to the after party. Scandalous things go down. Crazy people at trade shows. I always talk about, I see the way certain people dress at trade shows, like stay away from that person. Because I want to stay married. I want to stay happily married. But I do think, getting back, I do think Christian guys have been taught that everything that happens in their home is their fault. It's not. It's their responsibility. So they kind of blame themselves for that woman. And perhaps they were looking at pornography and they already have a guilty conscience and they feel like that this is like almost
well, make the distinction between responsibility and fault. Let's go back to that.
Sure.
Make the what's the difference between how is responsibility and fault? How are those different?
Sure. So I believe the man is the head of the home. And for everything that happens in the home, it's your responsibility to deal with those things and respond to it and react to it. That doesn't mean, like, let's say my son goes out and does something, like he steals a car, right? It's my responsibility to deal with all the things around there. And it may be that I failed in my discipline of my son. It also may be that he came under the influence of some friends he had that I didn't know, and wanting to have a good time or be wild or whatever, he got involved and did something. And it really isn't a major reflection on my parenting. I didn't know that he had these friends. It somehow escaped me. That could happen, right? But with a guy, if a woman cheats, it's his responsibility to decide how he's going to deal with the relationship now and respond to it. And he needs to ask if he played any role in it. To me, it's kind of a joke in the manosphere how guys wouldn't even consider that they were part of it, that they could be part of the reason she cheated on them, that their lack of masculinity, their lack of leadership, their lack of sexual prowess could potentially be it. I think they should at least be willing to consider it. What I don't want is it to be assumed that they're the cause of it.
Yeah.
But and that's what I want to protect against. But I do kind of get sick of these guys that act like women where they're not responsible for any of their actions. They rail how there's a guy in this chat here, some dummy that can't understand words and context, saying that I'm excusing women and that I think everything that they do is just because of a bad man or whatever. I never said that. I don't know where you got that from. I think women have as much agency as men do. I think we're different. We have different motivations and wiring and all that stuff. But I do think responsibility and fault is something we have to hang on to. I'm not androgynous. I don't believe in egalitarianism. I think patriarchy is built into the cosmos. I think it's inevitable. I don't think there's any way around it. That's where I differ with guys like Rollo that have created the feminine imperative, which is the manosphere version of the patriarchy, like looking to smash everybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, Rollo believes that women, if you get down into the psychology of it, there's a belief that women are superior to men. It's a victim complex. So, he's just one step away from, the bonobo world where maybe mommy will give it to me instead of being so mean. It's pretty sick when you get down into it. Michael, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
This is just because you are the most brilliant and nuanced pastor on this. And I think a lot of guys here who, you know, you kind of address, you know, obliquely, but just to be really nailing the head. If you're a Christian guy, where does forgiveness come into play with infidelity?
So God hates divorce, but he allows it. And so there's two conditions in scripture for divorce. One is porneia is the word. So people make it adultery. It's actually a little weaker than that. It doesn't require strict adultery. And even what is adultery is hard to say, like holding hands, oral sex, or some sort of manual stimulation that's not oral. So there's no actual penetration. Is it does it require actual penetration? And so what porneia is in scripture is this kind of broader category. And so you don't want to get to the point where it's like holding hands is porneia. And are we going to say that pornography, a guy looking at pornography, is porneia? Jesus says spiritually it's a form of adultery, but he also says hating your brother is a form of murder. So we don't kill people for hating a brother. And I think it would be a mistake to make every form of lust truly equal to physical adultery. I don't think that's the point Jesus is making, that they're the same family of sin and one leads to it when it's fully grown, is I think what he's saying. And so porneia would be the grounds for divorce. And it's not required that a man divorces his wife or a wife divorces her husband if they commit porneia. But it's there. It's there because sometimes even if you have to be willing to forgive repentant people. Forgiveness doesn't mean that the covenant isn't broken and you have to stay in it. In other words, it may be like, I can't do this. Like, you violated my trust. You slept with my best friend, or you slept with this other dude that is this big fat slob. I don't even get it. I don't understand. Or you did all these terrible things. And, you know, and I can't resolve this. I can forgive you. And I don't want you to be destroyed. Like, I don't want you to hell or whatever, but I don't want to stay married to you. And that's one of the grounds. And I think so. Even forgiveness, like let's say you see these Christians forgive someone that murdered a family member. Well, that's a different thing. That's forgiving them doesn't mean that absolves them of the crime, right? It says, I forgive you that you did it. I'm glad that you repent. Now you have to go face God. This is how things work. Right. You have to go pay the time. You're gonna go face God. I hope you have his forgiveness. Right. So then the other condition would be abandonment. And that comes in scripture if a unbelieving spouse won't stay in the relationship or they functionally abandon you. So let's just say you marry a woman and she runs off. You don't even know if she is having porneia or not, but she's ran off and she's not there anymore. The problem is in Christian marriages now, they try to turn abandonment. So you have women saying a guy looked at porn, therefore I can divorce him. He cheated on me. You see a lot of that now. And then you have a lot of women that'll say, this guy is not emotionally available to me and he doesn't hear me out. He's abandoned me relationally. But so this becomes a little complicated. Like what is actual abandonment? So I'd say abandonment is any sustained period of not fulfilling the most basic parts of a covenant, right? Like, so I would say if a woman refuses to have sex with her husband for an extended period of time, she has abandoned him in a very significant way. And he actually has, vice versa with the guy too, like he actually has a cause for divorce, right? Part of the benefits of marriage is the sexual relationship. And if she won't do that, she has abandoned that. I'd say that it's funny. You go back to like the Reformation, and there's elders like commanding. There's this one favorite. This is how nerdy I get on this stuff. I actually have records. I have the records that they took from elders meetings in Calvin's Geneva. It's called a consistory. So it's like written in cursive, and I have to look really hard to read it. And it's their records of what they told people. And one of them was they're telling this guy, look, your wife's saying you guys won't have sex. You have to have sex with her. If you don't do it, you know, she could divorce you, or we could put you under church discipline. I was just like, oh, this is fascinating to read this, you know. But so what I would say is, like, as Christians, I'm called to forgive people. I mean, at the heart of religion is Jesus forgiving a bunch of sinners, right? He came to die for us while we're still ungodly, while we're his enemies. But forgiveness doesn't mean that that takes away the responsibility of a violation of any sort of covenant, and you're free to leave it. And I think there are times as a pastor where you do recommend a man or a woman divorce another one. There are times people get mad, but it's not. It's something that I try not to do. I try to lay out as many options and thoughts and considerations and walk them through it. Um, and it depends on whether or not have kids, right? There's a lot of things that play into all this stuff. It's a mess right now.
It's context. It's context and all these
But
things.
do you think that, like, and I'm going to use the context too of a woman cheating on her husband. Do you think the guy can say we're going to stay together for the children? I think that's lame.
Well, what I would say is what I tell them as a past. So you see certain kind of thresholds where divorces happen. So you're really common, Tony, like between year 1 and 3 is one threshold. Then there seems to be another threshold right about year 8 to 10. And then the next major threshold is after the kids start to leave high school, or the last one does. And the reason for that last one's really easy to understand, is that the kids basically became the focal point of the marriage and not the relationship. And so now that the kids are moving out, the marriage has no purpose anymore. It falls apart. And that's why you have to keep a friendship and a sexual relationship with your wife. You have to have a greater mission than your children. So no, I would not think that would be the only reason to stay together. I think that can be a component in it, but that's the only reason. That's good. That's just delaying the inevitable, right? It's going to lead, and it's not what's going to be good for the kids either. But I do think the growing up in broken homes is part of what's gotten us into the mess that we're in. This is where effeminate men and brash women come from. Boys and girls need a mom and dad, right? Now you can go through the remarriage process and have a mom and dad that way, where it's in a stable home, but that is also tricky too. And our problem is, there's a lot of problems here, but no fault divorces, integrated workplace where women really don't need men financially. That's really changed things. So what we're in the rubble of the West trying to rebuild something, and that's why conversations like the ones we're having now are so important.
I'm trying to think of I wanted to bounce off what you just said. Damn it, I just went blank because I was concentrating on what you said. But let me look at my notes here. I got a ton of stuff. Oh, of course, I've got hypergamy is on here, and we know Pat is the world's foremost authority on hypergamy. How does hypergamy actually play into cheating? And I'll go to Pat on this one.
Well, what I've said about this is that the misconception that I think a lot of the red pill has. Okay, so hypergamy is a natural female instinct. And it's actually a really good question, is why is it villainized? Is it actually bad? Is it actually bad that women want men who have higher levels of fitness and success? Is, if you're a biological determinalist, if you're a materialist, like a lot of these guys are, well, in what sense would this be bad for the species, that women would be selective, that they would only pick the best men? Okay, this is a biological mechanism, though, that all women have. Men have their own, of preferring women who are young and fertile. And I'm sorry if the red pill has ignored the slew of stories of women who got older and their man cheated on them with the secretary, or the younger girl they met. That's pretty brutal for the woman. And, I'm not just understand that ruthlessness has no gender, that it can be pretty brutal on both sides. Okay. But the fundamental point here, hypergamy, All women have it. Every woman has it. Not every woman exercises it the same way. So there are some women, and if they've suffered, let's say, a certain amount of trauma, attachment issues, sometimes you can't even predict it on those basis. You know, the story that Michael mentioned earlier comes to mind. They may simply decide that they will go for a different guy. And it's not always necessarily because the guy's higher status if they're just looking for sex. But to simplify things, there is a lot of women, if they're in a relationship and they are engaged with a guy who's of a higher tier and they have an opportunity to do it, they might actually do it. They might actually go for that guy. Women will usually try to see how secure that potential jump is, which is why we have the term brand swinging, right? But not all women are going to cheat with that. Some women will cheat off the bat. Some women will feel it out. Other women will resist it, but then project frustration into their relationship or their marriage, where they get pissed off that their man isn't competing with it. And they're not going to cheat, or they won't cheat at least immediately. And a lot of these women, if it gets frustrating enough, they'll leave. So what people have to understand is hypergamy is a biological instinct, which is not necessarily bad, but is not always exercised in the same way based on the woman. And so it really comes down to morality based on a woman's going to respond, because we are not simply animals. Really, we aren't simply animals. Some people are much closer to animals than others, but we do have this spiritual transcendent quality. And the more that that's tapped into, you have to calibrate that based on actual behavior, because otherwise, as a man, if you saw an attractive woman and she gave you some eye contact, would you go and sleep with her right then? If you wouldn't go and sleep with her right then, if you were in a serious relationship or you were married, then you have to consider the same impulse in your woman. Would you, let's not be just dogmatic here is the point I'm trying to make.
Michael Foster, any thoughts on hypergamy?
I mean, it's undeniable. The problem is with the manospheres that they turn it into the ordering principle of all things, right? That's their problem. And it's like when the guy gets a new hammer, everything's a nail, right? And so everything's hypergamy. And you see this in the red pill guys. It's kind of annoying because you always have kind of like the freshman class coming in, and they took their first course on hypergamy, and you get them like ragging on you on Twitter or sending you messages lecturing you on how you're part of the feminine imperative and a blue pill. You're just
Purple
like,
pill, blue pill, right?
yeah, you just let them kind of, some of them will sort through it, some of them won't. But I think hypergamy is part of God's design, and here's how I would explain it. So in scripture, God makes man and woman. He makes the man first, and he makes the man to cultivate and keep the garden. People think that garden is like, corn and crops and stuff. It was actually a temple garden. So when you think of ancient temples, they have like these beautiful gardens, whatever. So it's a Levitical language. So he was keeping like this massive temple that was on this mountain. Ezekiel calls Eden the mountain of God. And another reason that's where the rivers start and they pour down the mountain. So it's this mountain. Adam's stuck into it. He puts in it. God plants this garden. It's like this kind of temple-like thing. And then God says to rule and reign, expand over the earth, right? So he's going to take the garden that God planted, this temple, and expand God's kingdom over the whole earth. That's Adam's deal. And then he's told to be fruitful and multiply, but he's not asexual, right? He can't just break off his finger and it turn into another person. And so he needs someone to help him. So a woman is made from Adam and brought to Adam. So Adam is made from the dirt, put in the garden to work the dirt. Eve is made from the man, brought to the man to help the man. So a woman's desire is to help a man. Women it's really fascinating that when you study male atheists, this is a good book, The Psychology of Atheism by Paul Vitz. Male atheists sort of personify their weak father relationship and rejection of God, but in a sort of father-like ideal. The female atheists, the well-known ones like Simone Bouvier or something like that, they tend to connect themselves to a man. So she was one of John Sartre's lovers. Sartre, how do you say his name? S-A-R-T. One of his lovers, and she was very faithful to him. It was like kind of crazy. And so women have this tendency to want to connect themselves to a man and experience greatness through the man. Why is this throughout? And so people say, here's like someone told me about this artist. Well, this woman, she was married to this poor artist. Didn't matter that he's poor. She saw that his art was great. He was great. He was a master. He was doing these things. She understood he was going to be great before anyone else did. But she saw his drive, his creation, his masculine ability. She was attracted to it because it's not just pure dollar signs. So Adam was given this mission. Eve was brought to help him. It makes sense if that's the prototypical male and female, that a woman is looking for someone that has a mission bigger than herself. Women don't want to be the mission, but they want a guy that has a mission that's worthy of their love, right? That's worthy of their devotion. And so hypergamy to me is a representation of that, is a representation of looking for a high status man, a man that's getting things done. And, status is contextual. It could be the quarterback in high school. It could be the professor in college, whatever. And that's why there's a contextual element to a arousal with women that isn't as present with men, where it's more with fertility cues, pretty simple stuff. But so I think hypergamy is an expression of that can be corrupted into monkey branching. It can be corrupted into infidelity. But just like the same thing with a man, men should have lots and lots and lots of sex, and produce lots of children just with one woman is what I would say. And so I would say the man's desire to be have lots of sex is a gift from God as well, but it needs to be channeled into the marriage relationship or it spins out into chaos, And so I look at our natural desires and I read them through the lens of God's creation and how sin might twist something. And so I think hypergamy is undeniable for anyone that has eyes to see. But with guys like, I'm sick of saying his name, with nihilistic dudes, with nihilistic guys though, hypergamy is heartbreaking to them because they hate it. They don't want it to be true. And they obsess over it because they hate it so much. They really do.
Well, Michael, I mean, just kind of jumping off that, if you have no purpose to your life, then you end up fixating as a man. You end up fixating on material things. And you end up resenting other people who maybe have this extra women or this extra, financial assets or whatever. It really does come down to that most guys today, and I think, and I'm curious maybe what you think about this on your sense. I can tell you that it seems to me, of course, we've always had infidelity. We've always had it. We always will have it. It'll always happen. But it seems today it's much more common, even if we're not talking about the super strict versions, the soft versions of it. A story like you mentioned that happened in, that other church with that girl. It's a very common story today. Back then, 500 years ago, it would be a rare enough circumstance that they might have burned the girl alive. You know what I mean? One of those things. Like, I'm not saying to justify that, by the way. I'm just observing that was probably, it was a rarity. It was a rarity. Now you could say on one hand, was it a rarity because of the heavy-handed force, because of that threat behind it? And I'm sure that was part of it,
Absolutely part of it.
absolutely part of it. But I also believe that a major thing, and maybe if we don't go back 500 years, if we just go back 100, 200, there's a lack of meaning in existence today. What the fuck are most of these guys living for? I mean, seriously, I'm not saying that they shouldn't live for anything, but when I see a lot of the stuff in the manosphere, this grasping, what you understand that there's nothing, that we're not being offered anything, but what are you offering in turn? These guys don't have anything to live for, and what makes them think, if they have nothing to live for, that a woman, you know, they're a good little servant to the system? Do they actually think a woman is going to really respect them and actually think that they're serving their true purpose? I can tell you, I have not seen women cheat on men who are serving their purpose. Haven't seen it happen.
It's not common.
I mean, there's probably been an example of it, but I can't recall one offhand. That's how rare and uncommon it is. It's always the guy who's asleep doing what he was supposed to do. So
I think the reality of it is no one's happy, right? Men are killing themselves, record numbers, right? The men are killing themselves lots of ways, right? Like there's guys with, I saw this guy, someone posted this. It was like a TikTok or something that went viral on Twitter, I thought, today. He's like in his mid-20s and he's sitting in front of a computer all day long listening to classical music and playing Railroad Tycoon.
yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And so, and then, obviously the guy probably has tons of talent, right? There's like something there that's being wasted. I wouldn't be surprised. I bet, I mean, he might be an idiot, but also there's a lot of guys out there that are dying other ways. Like they're like never they're not accomplishing anything. They're not building anything. It's going to be a very empty life. And so you see these suicide rates, but with women's, the number of them that are abusing prescription drugs and are alcoholics right now, like the drunkenness rate with women is not at parity with men. The way we have set things up is failing for everybody. And these women also that sleep around, like there's no way around it. If you like guys, a woman cheating and a guy cheating, fornication, all this, morally equal sins against God. The way it plays out relationally and how it affects them psychologically is very different. You can see it. You can see in like it does something very destructive to women at a quicker rate. It takes a man a little longer to get there, I think. I don't think that's actually the case in really in a lot of homosexual situations. It does damage a man's psyche pretty rapidly. But with a woman, there's something not there. There's a stare, right? You see it. You learn to like stay away.
Thousand cock stare, right? Yeah.
We don't call that in the church, but that's There's eyes, but I am pretty good at spotting it as a pastor, those that have been sexually abused or those that have been sexually promiscuous, because there's tells. There's like really obvious tells. And so this idea that women are just loving it, just having a great time, and these guys resent them, man, it sucks for everybody on whole right now. The world that we've built is broken. And the problem, like, my book's doing really well. It's been a bestseller. It's crazy. It's been a bestseller.
It's an incredible book. It's an incredible book. I've been meaning to shout. I mean, I have like the last third of it, so I haven't shouted it out publicly yet. But it's amazing. It's good to be a man. It's an amazing book, Michael.
Oh, praise God. So it's been out. It's been a bestseller for 12 weeks, getting all sorts of stuff. But it's opened me. A lot of these guys are calling me, and these pastors. There's pastors are like, "What do we do? Like, it's a real problem. How do we help these men? How do I get my wife's passion back? Like it's waking these guys up." And people are starting to see like fixing the thing that we're trying to fix right now. This is why I think MGTOW fails. Hear me out on this one, real quick. Hear me out. This problem cannot be fixed in one generation. It is impossible. It is too big. And the question is, who will keep fighting the battle after us?
Yeah.
Well, it's my sons. If I raise them right, if I build a community, if we do it like by God's mercy, my boys and my girls will pick this up. And we have to build communities. Like, how else are we going to? You can't. The legal change that needs to happen. You know, it's this idea that all society will fall and then we'll rebuild, and that's just such a common cop out sort of passive thing. And I'm not here to shame the MGTOW guys. You got to make your decisions. You got to deal with all that stuff. But I'm just telling you that things are so bad that this is going to take, we didn't get here overnight, right? This like the way this goes back at least 150, 170 years where we're at, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a question we'll start with Pat on this one. To the chat, I have a special guest that's going to come in. Lux Maximus. I'm just kidding. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but I've been listening to a little bit of his stuff at work, and I have to make sure my customer isn't around. But
okay,
it's quite a take on life. There's definitely some satire there, but it's quite funny, and I don't even know what to think. But I would love, if he's watching by any chance, I would love to have him on this channel one night. I think it would just be a riot. So, Pat, check out Lux Maximus on YouTube. Michael Foster.
It's a good name.
Don't check out
Lux Max.
Michael Foster. Don't check out Lux Maximus.
All right. Duly noted.
Anyways, it's Alexio. That's funny because I was listening to one and I saw he answered one of your questions in his symposium. So, but anyways, my question to you guys, I'll start with Pat, is do you think cheating, infidelity, affairs, because of social media, Instagram, all these dating apps, do you think it's more prevalent now, or has it just come out of the closet, say, versus 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago?
Absolutely. I mean, Look, everybody is programmed, and it takes the rare individual to break out of the matrix, so to speak. But we're being totally blunt here. Women are far less likely to do it than men. Men are designed to be able to be oppositional to control structures because, and I'm speaking simply on the biological level. I actually happen to agree with the stuff that Michael would probably believe on this, but simply speaking biologically, and there's a great book that talks about that. Roy Baumeister, Is There Anything Good About Men? Men are nature's experiments. So we are the gambles in the early, there are actually, we say that's a 50-50 chance of a boy or a girl. It's technically not right. It's more like 51-49 because it's assumed by nature that those boys are going to die by the time they get to adolescence because they have genetic issues. Boys are much more likely to have genetic issues and problems, and they just die off, right? And we look at hypergamy, right? Hypergamy is a reflection of this. And everyone looks and observes that the people in the highest positions of power in any field are men. And look, to maybe appease some of the feminists who might happen to stumble across this, it's not because men are better on average, but it's because men are better. There are better men in aggregate. There are the men who exist on the top end of the spectrum in IQ and in every single structure. There are also those same men on the lowest end. We don't think about them though, because they're in prison, they're on the street. We ignore them. Society forgets about them. They're on the bottom end of the bell curve. And so it's easy to focus on the successful ones and say that things are unfair. Okay. So tap me back in, Tony, with the primary question, because I got
What's
too
the
much
social media like?
social media. Yeah. So women have always cared more than men about what the rest of society is doing. You always will have in a structure this small amount of men who will disagree with the structure for whatever reason. We can be outcast, and so at first they might start out, they got maybe no women with them. They're this tiny group. Most of the women are with the structure. You see this going on right now, today. Perfect example of it. You have all of these women who support what's going on in the broader structure, but gradually they're peeling off. And I can tell you it's been a very rapid peel off in the last 2 years. And you can frankly observe it. If you've been in the manosphere for 5 years, how many more women are there right this year than there were 5 years ago? I mean, we're like, there were almost no women 5 years ago. And every year it doubles. Every single year the number doubles because women are looking to see what is popular, what is supposed to happen. So social media, prior, you'd have these little communities and you would have less to compare yourself to. And so it was much easier for women wouldn't necessarily fall into fantasy about certain stuff. But when you take into consideration all the aggregate trauma that we're experiencing as a society, and then you have women who can observe other women who are presenting almost invariably sanitized versions of their lives, then they can start to believe, well, that's what every other woman should have. I'm not part of that. And they don't take responsibility for it themselves because they're not just simply designed to do it. They're just unhappy. They're unhappy. And so because they're unhappy, they're more inclined to cheat to find some outlet to be happy. Some guy who can sell them the fantasy. There's I haven't watched this, but I was hearing about this the other day about a documentary about this guy on Tinder who would pretend to be a super rich guy, and he was catfishing women. Actually, it was like a Ponzi scheme. He's pretending to be this multimillionaire. He had certain pictures and whatnot, and he was getting women to give him all this money to kind of continue the whole thing. Anyway, the point is just simply that it was playing to their vanity. And in the old days, how many different guys would step into the village? What kind of pool did you have to compare yourself to? The stratification of society. It's changed now. On social media, if you have a woman who is not grounded and she has a big social media account, she's going to inevitably fall prey to that inclination to show off her body and try to get attention, and to then think of herself on a different level that's not realistic.
Yeah. Isn't it like social media with guys though, too? I mean, think about it. Isn't it kind of the same?
It is similar. I mean, it's affecting everybody. Like, none of this stuff is, it only affects women, it doesn't affect men. But because women are objects of desire, and they want to be desired, social media sites like Instagram are uniquely hijacking to them, because it can give them an impression that because they're being observed in this passive way, that they're on a different level than they were before. It begins to create some sort of unrealistic expectations. Now, I am somebody who believes in the transcendent ability of people, and I do believe that women can and do get past this stuff, usually are more immune to it. Some are more disinterested in it to begin with because they understand it. And I do believe that there are, as men are waking up to the con, I do believe that women are too. I see it happen all the time. And I want this community. If I could say one thing about the manosphere, I wanted to say the manosphere because the fact of the matter is men are the ones who introduced the problems and, observed it, started to address it. And I don't want to see this situation, which is why I've very recently had a couple of spats with, e-girls who will go out there and will start to spout out bullshit to get attention and sort of redirect us. I think I'm happy to have some female allies in the situation. But fundamentally, this is about men being men, not looking to women to tell men what they want to hear, right? There's a big conservative cope thing. You get a blonde bimbo who says, I like guns. And then like the guys are like, yeah, we love it. We love this. I want her, it's pathetic shit. This is a male problem. Okay. It's a problem for men to solve. But at the end of the day, this is something that we're going to tackle together because it's a problem that we face together. It's not this situation where it's just like women are totally fucked and only men have a potential for redemption. Women have a potential for redemption too. There are a lot of women who genuinely did dumb shit when they were younger who are coming out. I don't trust the ones online necessarily who are out there trying to spout their opinions because they're out there trying to get attention. But I'm making a point that you are going to see more and more women start to flip away from their old lifestyle. And part of that will be because all the attractive, confident men are in our corner. Part of that will be that because the women are going to follow those men. But at the same time, they're also coming to the realization themselves, were they happy doing what they were doing? And the fact is they weren't. They weren't. And you can even talk to women who are totally in the matrix today, and you can ask them if they really enjoy what they're doing, if they actually find it liberating. No, they don't find it liberating. They're jaded. They're just trying to pass the time. And as far as a lot of them are concerned, if we're all going down the ship, why can't I just fuck somebody? What am I trying to hold out even for? That's actually the kind of conversations, if you talk to women, that are going on right now.
Michael Foster?
If you watch Facebook Reels, TikTok, or Instagram stories, you know that the language that. So anytime I go on these, I'm waiting for a compilation of people figuring out that I'm on this show. Kind of don't want them to, but because the whole tactic these days is guilt by association. So, but anyway, I did this meme actually that I know Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson knew Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens knew Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton knew George W. Bush. George W. Bush knew George Sr. He was CIA. CIA was connected to Osama bin Laden. Foster's connection to Taliban confirmed. It's like that sort of stuff. But the thing is, what Pat's saying here, and even the strong language, is the language these women are using. This is how they're talking on these reels, on these TikToks. They're normalizing. It's like to see all women become hussies. It's something else. And it's like, so I don't mind my wife talking to me sexually. I quite like it. But to see even the way that these kind of family-centered TikToks, Facebook Reel things, where the husband and wife are kind of putting their intimate sexual details front and center. It's immodest and weird. And the way that these women all sexualize themselves, it's something else, man. And they do it for attention, no doubt about it. And so, yeah, social media is changing a lot. Like it changes the way that men think. It always blows my mind how guys trust an influencer's depiction of themselves. It's wild. Even people that like me will sometimes think I'm way more awesome than I actually am. I'm like, I hate to let you down, buddy, But no, like, that's not the truth. I don't have all that stuff figured out, and no, but you do see these guys that couldn't ever imagine the status in these guys' marriage, or the state of their health, or the state of their finances, or their actual living conditions, or who they actually are outside of their little tiny video area or whatever. They could never imagine. They couldn't conceive it, because they are strangely naive. And what's crazy is that when you think this is a real man, and if you found out how much it was fake, maybe you wouldn't feel like a failure. Maybe you would know, actually, you're not that much different from some of these guys. And now some of these guys, you and I both know some guys that are pretty incredible men and what they've accomplished. There are some real disciplined folks out there, but for every real disciplined guy, guy that's got it together and he does present himself, I've been pleasured. One of my great pleasures was finding out that Elliot Hulse was for real. Because he seems like he might not be, just because he's that big personality. But then you meet Elliot, you're like, dude, he loves his wife. He's very considerate. When he's with you, he gives you his entire attention. He doesn't showboat. He doesn't need to be the center of attention. And you're like, this guy is pretty quality,
Yeah, I mean, I've been to his house, at a party, and Elliot was everything that he portrays himself as.
Yeah, he's a quality guy. He's an honest, authentic man. He is who he is, right? So there are guys like that out there, but it is mind-blowing to me how these men think these guys who claim to be awesome and all this stuff are actually like that. And I think it holds them back, because they feel like, oh, I could never measure up to it. Well, buddy, they can't measure up to it either. It's a big show. So there's that. Another thing that stands out to me is porn has changed the way guys talk about and think about women. Now, guys, there's always been some guys that had a ranking system for women. But usually it's been like, she's hot, she's not hot, she's all right. Right. But there's a sort of fetishizing of every aspect of women now. Oh, I'm into redheads. I'm into this. I have this list and this thing, whatever. I think that is probably because of the ubiquity of porn and your ability to choose different types of things. Right. Like, and so I think even these guys, by being online, they think this is the type of woman that they want to get. They have this very developed idea of what a 10 is and what they would want. And then they have this very developed idea of what it means to be this alpha guy. And they could never be that guy, because they see this guy pretending to be this guy and they actually believe it's real. And so what a woman that would make them happy, they can't get. And the man they want to be, they can't be.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And the truth is, a woman that you would rank as a 5 right now, in your porn-filled, retarded brain, right, would actually be a lovely wife, and you would be attracted to her in some cases, but you're screwed up. You're screwed up because you watched all this stuff, and you think this is what people look like all the time and how people act, and it's a movie, right? It's got lighting, it's planned in a lot of cases. Some of it's like really highly financed, and these guys aren't real. So social media, the life mediated through a screen, is a problem we have to figure out. The internet is making this happen. The internet's not all bad. I'm not trying to overreact, but we have to admit that there is a corruption of male and female thinking on a incredible level right now. And in the manosphere, it's got to start. It's got to become real world. We got to get with guys and start, help. I wish more people would come to 21, actually, because, like, people are like, how can you hang out with all those pickup artists? And I was thinking, like, I was sitting at the bar with a couple that was celebrating their 51st anniversary. Like, you have no idea what happens at this convention. And then you get to see the people. And watching some of the speakers at this last year's convention squirm was so funny to me. I thought it was hilarious. They're like, I don't know what to do with these people, they're like, okay, he's not what he pretends to be, and like, oh, he is. That guy's legit. I should trust that guy more. I think that would be really helpful for some of these people just to see the real thing. So this is the dilemma we're in. Social media, internet, all this stuff is part of a battle that we have to fight right now.
Yeah.
I went on a rant. There we go. Pat's back.
No, I like it. I like it. I like it.
All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the topic was cheating, and we're going to wrap it up because I got to go to work early tomorrow. But
hey, can we bring Alexio on? I want to talk to this guy.
No. Well, I saw the comments about a 5. I mean, I'll make a statement about like women. I think one of the things the manosphere does is it, and we'll say more toward the red pill. It pushes you into, I think, something that is not reachable for a lot of guys. And I think that's one of the manosphere fails. Is that again? I don't care who dates who. I don't care what your woman looks like. I really don't care. If you like her, that's fine. But I think the manosphere puts more judgment on what people think of you with the woman of your choice versus you just being with the woman of your choice.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, I agree 100% with what Michael's saying. I think that the number 5 triggers a lot of guys. So
that's more. Let's be fair. Like that's more of your guys'
7,
world more than me.
They might have felt differently about it. You know, it's the reality is that looks are a threshold issue, and one of the things that I've observed in my practice quite commonly is that a lot of guys who don't make really any action on women, and they have a real antipathy towards a lot of women, but then they'll have a real obsession, is that they will say that they can only have this girl who's at this sort of 9-10 level. And yeah, and very often it's not very natural, the appearance of it. They have a fantasy of it. And so they latch onto that, and then they block out any girl that doesn't meet the fantasy. And then if they do happen to meet a girl who might go onto it, then they hook onto it, and then they collapse. The reality is that looks are the primary thing, the first thing that a guy is going to be interested in a woman. And I consider it a threshold issue, and they have to cross that threshold. And once that threshold hits, then everything else starts to matter. And, you know, if she looks better than what she does right then, you know, you can say you're running up the score. But you have to hit that point, and you know, you could use a different number if you want to, but Michael's point is the same. I mean, if you're in a real relationship with someone, your girl's gonna look different sometimes in the morning. You know, she has a baby, she's gonna look different some days. Like, it'd be fucking real. You're gonna look different some days too. It's just the way it is. It's the way it is. It would the manosphere is not going to really do anything at the end of the day unless the people in it decide to deal with reality. And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff has come out of seeing the reality of the fact that we've been sold an illusion. This stuff that women are perfect angels. You get these perfect princess girls that can't do anything wrong. It's bullshit. Women are a lot of women are feral today, straight up, and there's no accountability for it. And there's no accountability because the men aren't doing anything about it. The men don't call it out. Men are too afraid to call it out. But we also have to then, once we can't stay in that point of just simply complaining. And we have to move from, yeah, this is BS, and here's what we're building. Here's what we're creating on it. Here's how we're going to be leading. And if we don't do that, then this community is controlled opposition. You know, I think a lot of those really hardcore red pill people are controlled opposition.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
like it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've said this before. I'll say it again. Why haven't any of them ever got banned? You know, you have people like Anthony that get demonetized. You know, I'm on a follower lock. A lot of us have had some really serious crap. We constantly get hit down. We're preaching, you know, actually healthy relationships. These guys preach anti-woman stuff all day long. You never see a single thing happen to them. So
I think they
Think
keep
about
guys
that for a second.
pacified. Hey, let me just
Yeah,
say
yeah,
this
control
to all of
opposition.
you. I don't know what a 5 is. I have no clue what a 5 is in a girl. I wouldn't even know to begin with. That's not my world. I got married when I was young. I've been with my wife. I know I find her quite attractive, and I know she has no weight issues compared to some people's wives. And so like I said
She had
5
eight
because
kids. She had 8 kids too. So
yeah, and I said 5 because I thought what's down the middle, right? I thought what's average. I don't know how it works out, but you know, if everyone's marrying above average people, right? If everyone's above average, then that's the new average, right? And that's a superior bias, right? It's a sort of a cognitive mistake. So just so whatever. Get your 6 or 7, whatever, but do something instead of like build a life together. Here's the most dangerous thing in the world. The biggest danger to a tyranny is men with something to lose. Men with women and children. And I I wrote a book. I started a church that has 200 people. I fly around. I've built a career. I did it because I have children and I'm invested in this world. And people can tell me, "Oh no, I'll do more," and I'll say, "All right, well, that's cool. Do more." Like I'm happy to be wrong on this, but I think men are like trucks. The more weight you put on them, the straighter they drive. And I wish more people would find the woman they'd be happy with. I'm just saying, stop living in fantasy land. You know, like translate it to in a real world, and you slap whatever number on it that lets you sleep at night, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that a lot. I think guys do like that's why I started this conversation or this little end conversation was that it's not realistic. It's not. I think it's holding a lot of guys back from building and creating a relationship. If that's what you want, there's a lot of guys that don't want that, and hey, I respect that. I've always thought that MGTOW is a great place to visit, but you don't want to live there. I think it can be a healthy thing for a guy to go his own way. But I think as as a guy gets older, um, I think it'd be a positive thing if you build a relationship and build a family. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And again, the guys who don't want to do it, hey, that's your choice. That's your choice.
It
can I
is.
just make a real comment to what
Absolutely.
David Little saying here in the chat? I just don't understand how women get these amazing passes for cheating and men lose things. It's weird to me. This is the material structure issues with the system. I don't want to belabor it too much, but I just want to say it's not fair, it's not right, and it's not what anybody on this panel is justifying. I mean, in a healthy society, there's when women would be severely rebuked for what they were doing, and they would not be rewarded by the system for what's going on. It doesn't mean that as men, we are, how do I put this? You still want to have the awareness and everything, right? It doesn't mean that you hide away from the world because of the possibility of this stuff because the system isn't fair. But I want to acknowledge that it isn't fair. Like I don't want anybody to think it's not fair. It's not fair.
No, it's terrible. The system is designed to control men, and they do it by breaking down the family. It's funny is that before the Civil Rights Act and before welfare, the black family it was largely intact in America and very strong,
Mhm.
and it was only after that that it broke down. And there's a good book by Charles Murray, Coming Undone. I think it's what it is.
Mhm.
It's been a while
Mhm,
since I
mhm.
read it, but it was talking about how white America was also basically falling to the same thing right now. And why they get away with it is because men have been demonized, and they want to keep men knocked down, and they want to keep them weak, and they want to keep atomized men, individual men with few assets are really easy to control, or the easier to control, at least to isolate. And I think that's what our government's trying to do is isolate men and take away resources from them, and control them. And so I think it's an act of tyranny by a nanny state
Mhm.
is what's going on there. There's no logic behind it other than true misandry. So why do they hate men? You got to ask that question. I think it's because they pose a threat to a tyrannical government. That's why.
100%. 100%.
Well, guys, it's been an awesome stream. I hope Pat and Michael, you'll stay on backstage for a couple minutes, but
Sure.
we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I do appreciate everybody in the chat. There's some people maybe I don't remember. Angry Voodoo, good to see you. Self-made, of course, good to see you, brother. Hold the Truth, David Little, Caduceus. Caduceus is the vital message, just so you guys know. Ojit, good to see you. Tuesday, good to see you. A lot of people here. Appreciate all your comments. Hey, you guys know on this channel, we can disagree, and that's cool. But you know what we can't do? We can't agree to disagree. That just doesn't happen here. Disagreeing is fine. Agree to disagree. That doesn't work. So, but I want to thank Pat Stedman for coming on tonight, giving us some great insight on on cheating, on infidelity, on affairs. Love having you on, Pat. How can everybody find you, first of all?
You find me on Twitter at Pat_Stedman, and YouTube channel. Just put in the YouTube bar, Pat Stedman.
Yeah,
you'll get my channel. I just want to say I know a lot of you guys from prior shows on Tony's. When I've been on here probably like at least 5 times, 6 times at this point. Hold the Truth hostage, David Little, Uncle Guns. I appreciate you guys. And I appreciate the open forum, and I also appreciate the banter. It's funny. I've been looking at some of these things in the chat. They are really hilarious at times.
It is good stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. Look, we're all on the same page at the end of the day. We're all on the same side. We're all fighting the same fight here. So I appreciate all of you.
Absolutely. And Michael Foster, how can everybody find you?
I'm on Twitter. This is Foster. Is my handle.
Instagram, We Made People.
I'm on We Made People. That's the new book I'm working on. A podcast and a new book called We Made People, with my wife. And just it's the struggles of a first generation patriarch. What is it? I'm from a broken family. My grandfather was kind of a cult leader, to be honest. I never really knew him, but I've got his evil book. But so I'm writing a book of what it's like to come from nothing and try to restart, and to encourage other people that are in the same dilemma, So that's what that Instagram's about. You could also get my book at Amazon. That'd be cool. The feminists are starting to find out about it. And so I'm starting to get those 1-star reviews where they didn't read it. One actually had made a fake page and said it was me. Like, the first book's called "It's Good to Be a Man," and it's because on the 6th.
Awesome book.
Thank you so much. So anyway, it's an encouraging book, and it tries to. I hope when men leave, they leave feeling more encouraged. So yeah, you can find me there. And just double down. I love the chat stuff. I hope you all go home to your wives or girlfriends who aren't 5s. I know they're not. They're 9.5. That's only 5, right? So.
And again, a big announcement for people that weren't here in the beginning, but I'm going to say here in mid to late February, we will have Stefan Molyneux live. So get ready for that one. It's going to be a really good one. And I do want the chat, and I will probably open up the panel that night. And so you can, I want to chat with Stefan, and we'll have a good time, because I'm looking forward to that. He did, he did commit to it here about a month ago. So I'm going to get back with him. So hopefully here in the next, we'll say 2 to 3 weeks, Stefan Molyneux will be on Reality Check. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a bomb. So, yeah. So, and also, again, Pat Stedman, thank you for hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate you more than you know. Michael Foster, always a pleasure. Just fantastic insight on family. Just great stuff. I appreciate everybody, and I will probably do Saturday night. I didn't do last Saturday night, but we're going to rock it out with that. Peace. Thank you, everybody, for coming on, and we'll see you on Reality Check. Or on, I'm sorry, Get It Off Your Chest Saturday night. Cheers.
darkness is your ally. You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man. By then it was nothing to me but blinding.